Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Biollywood podcast. In this series, we talk about biological threats and the pop culture media that they appear in. I'm J.T. O'Brien, Research Principal at the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense, and I'm here with the Commission's Executive Director, Dr. Asha M. George.
Hey.
Today, we'll be discussing the TV show Dune Prophecy that just came out in this last year, I guess now, in 2024. This show is set in the expansive universe of Frank Herbert's Dune, but focuses on new characters and storylines from earlier in the franchise and the series, and it mostly draws upon books by his son Brian Herbert. The series is set 10,000 years before the events of Dune, the first Dune novel, and then also the first and second movies by Denis Villeneuve. And this is following the aftermath of the Battle of Corrin, which was the decisive ending battle of humans against thinking machines, or as we call them, AI. Mm-hmm. And the story follows the sisters Valya and Tula Harkonnen as leaders of the new group or faction within the Duneverse known as the Bene Gesserit. And they're a powerful social, religious, and political force that, basically lasts 10,000 years from this point up until the events of Dune. And this is a spoiler alert. If you have not seen Dune Prophecy, I highly recommend that you do so before continuing this podcast. The podcast will contain spoilers for the entirety of Dune Prophecy, and we also might get into a little bit with the Denis Villeneuve movies, and then also the books, leading all the way up to Frank Herbert's sixth book, which I think was also very focused on the Bene Gesserit. Mm-hmm. So we had a pretty awesome cast, I think, for this, so I want to just highlight some of them. We had Emily Watson as Valya Harkonnen. We had Olivia Williams as Tula Harkonnen, Chloe Leah as Sister Lila, Jade Anuka as Sister Theodosia. We had, and then also finally, last but not least, we had Travis Fimmel as Desmond Hart.
Yeah.
And then Chris Mason as Kyrian Atreides, and Mark Strong as Emperor Javico Carino. I want to start talking about the virus that we see eventually show up in the show. I think I don't know about you, but it took me by surprise. I know I told you about it, but but when I was watching the show, just because I'm just a big fan of Dune in general, getting to that fifth episode, and then them basically saying what's going on with Desmond Hart, and this whole thing is actually a virus that was created during the Valerian Jihad by AI and Bio.
Yeah.
That was a huge shock to me. I wasn't expecting that to be the cause of why people were burning up from the inside out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was really interesting that they tied that in, especially now that with everything we have going on with AI and Bio and how it's becoming a much more popular topic, and they really weaved it in really well.
Yeah.
But I think there's still a lot of mystery around the virus, which is something I'm hoping to get more information about with season 2, when you do get that. How did you think the virus was kind of just presented, just baseline in the show?
I thought it was interesting that we had been talking about the movies, the two movies that came out recently, and also talking about the books. So before we even knew that Dune Prophecy was a thing, we were talking about the movies and the recent movies and the books, and asking whether what happens in those books and in those movies counts at all as a biodefense thing.
Right.
And we decided no, because the dust is, what is it called? The spice. I mean, it's not really spice. It's not really a food. It's probably more like a chemical, agent than it is a biological agent. So we kind of put that aside, and then we were talking about the worm and
how biolog,
all of that, and we were kind of tenuously making some connections there, but we finally just decided no, it's not as clear a connection to biodefense as with other things that we've been watching for this podcast. So I just think it's interesting that we were sitting around thinking about bio warfare and biodefense, and it was as if HBO heard us and said, "Hey, let's put that into into this thing." So that's the first thing I wanted to say about that. I just thought it was kind of interesting. I thought that it was a surprise to me, because you don't see in either of the movies, or even really in the books, you don't really see people getting sick.
You don't.
They talk a lot about the addiction to spice.
Right.
They talk a lot about the weirdness that's going on in House Harkonnen and others of the families, the kind of just generally odd behavior they're engaging in.
Right.
They talk about whatever the Bene Gesserit are up to.
With their genetic birthing program
and tracking and all. But they don't, there's not there's no pandemic or anything like that, really. At least not that I recall. So interesting. It's interesting to me that a writer said, well, we're going to do this other thing. What has not been done yet?
Right.
So I like that they added this as a different thing to add to the Dune universe.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that's what surprised me, is because I know we've talked about the Dune movies quite a bit, and there is a lot of biology, I think, in the books.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything that's supposed to be happening, like there's not supposed to be magic,
right,
in the Duneverse. Everything has an explanation. So when Desmond Hart, Travis Fimmel's character, was able to burn these people from the inside out, I think one of the biggest theories, as I was watching the show and tracking what the community, was thinking and was saying, is, how is he doing this? There has to be a scientific explanation.
Wow.
That for why this is happening. It can't be magic.
Well, what's the scientific explanation for the use of the voice by those women?
I don't know what it is, but I know where it comes from.
Okay.
The idea is, me and you sitting here talking to each other, I can say certain things that will make you do something.
Okay.
And, it's basically like manipulation, but simplified. So you can convince people to do things just by talking to them.
Sure.
So this is kind of like an extension of that, by basically simplifying it and just saying somebody could just use their voice.
Okay.
So it's basically drawing on manipulation tactics or things like that. And I think we saw that in the final episode with Emperor Carino.
Uh-huh.
Valya Harkonnen didn't use the voice on him, but she manipulated him in such a way that he ends up taking his own life.
Yeah.
She could have just used the voice, but she didn't. She used traditional manipulation tactics.
Right.
To get him to get to that point.
Uh-huh.
Same thing, kind of bringing Francesca into the mold there.
Right.
Getting him to really question everything about his entire life.
Sure.
So I think that's a pseudo-scientific answer to the question.
Okay. So, but I mean, the point you're making is that it's still not magic.
It's supposed to be grounded.
That it's not, but considered by the community or by Frank Herbert himself.
Right.
To be magical. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's supposed to be a scientific answer, even if we don't always get those answers, and I don't think we got enough answers in the show about how the virus operates. But I do think we got a lot more information than I was expecting.
Well, and I think it's realistic. It's not like the virus has spread throughout the entire universe at this point.
Right, that we know, yeah.
That anybody knows about. But I would think that if people are burning up or look like they're burning up from the inside out, that word of that would start getting around all over the place if it was widespread.
Right.
So basically, you have an outbreak. You have a biological event that, as with anything, why would they be able to characterize the people who the people whom it is affecting, and the people who just kind of discovered it? Why would they know everything about it? right? So to me, it made sense. Like it was unfolding. Like okay, episode 5, they kind of narrow it down and figure out like, oh, okay, this is a virus,
right?
And somebody actually, I mean, technically somebody, but it was really like an ancestor occupying, somebody else. But they had a memory of something that happened in a previous war.
Right.
And said it kind of looks like that. I thought all of that was really realistic. This is how we go about stuff. I don't even want to call it attribution. It's more like this is what disease detectives do. This is what epidemiologists do, and doctors do. They start out by saying it kind of reminds me of X, or it looks like Y.
Like with COVID. Okay, it's a coronavirus. Is this going to be like 2003 with SARS-1? Is this going to be worse, better, same?
Right. And I think it provides a starting point.
Right.
So I thought the amount of information that they were discussing was appropriate for the level of understanding of where they were. If the show had decided to go to whoever modified Desmond, and those people are credited with being the ones that created this AI biovirus.
Yeah.
And if they still only gave us that little bit of information, that I would think is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
We're not to the people or to the entities that created it in the first place. So I thought it was okay.
In the context of the show.
Yeah. No, at least not yet.
Right, not yet.
This is what you're saying, right? In season 2, we would expect we're going to get more backstory now. We're going to see what happened to Desmond in the first place. What happened to him when Tula gave him up as a child, and all the way from then up to where he comes back and wreaks all this havoc with House Corrino. What happened to him? In that is when we should hear about this.
About the virus.
Yeah.
Because they did show, I think, not like a flashback of the hooded character kind of doing something to his eye.
Yeah, but it was like a second, right?
It was like a second. You didn't get any information about that.
And do you think that the eye was generating the virus or activating the virus? What was the relationship between the eye and the nanotechnology inside that eye and the expression of this virus?
Yeah, well, it's not. They don't explain it, but I was wondering the same thing. What's the connection there? What's the mode of transmission? How close does he need to be to a target to send this virus? Or is the virus just transmitting and then he has an ability to activate
it? That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, because he kills 2 people across, I don't know how far away the planets are, but he kills the boy, Richese, and he also kills Kasha, the sister, simultaneously on 2 different planets.
Okay.
I think it was episode. I don't know what episode. Remember the episode where he sees the boy.
Yeah.
And he starts burning up, but then the sister, back on Wallach 9, I think, which is the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah.
She starts screaming and burning up too. So I can't remember if there was a point where Desmond had met her.
And would you need to? I mean, look, it's supposed to be advanced technology. So what the standoff distance would be for triggering something, there's nothing to say that it couldn't be across galaxies.
Right.
We just
don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. And we don't know if it's like, like a satellite system. You pick up the phone and you call England. It's not that there's a signal going directly from your phone to somebody over in England. It's that it's going up into a satellite and bouncing over to another satellite and bouncing yet to another satellite, and then it's coming down. That signal is coming down in England. Why can't it be that way with this as well? Not to oversimplify the technology inside the guy's eye to just basic, radio transmission or phone transmission, but I think it could, it could be that way.
There's something because there is this concept in the Dune universe called the Holtzman effect. That's what drives space travel and interstellar space travel, and basically faster than light like warp speed. It also allows for faster than light communication through waves.
Okay.
So that could be the method of which that they're using to be able to simultaneously across light years be able to do this.
Right.
To be able to trigger it. The Holtzman effect is also responsible for the invention of the shield technology that they have.
Interesting. But then don't you think it's fascinating, if this is the case, then we learn later, we see it actually in the most recent Dune movie, that spice is used by the space navigators, right? Why would they need it? And what impact would that have on this Holtzman thing?
So the Holtzman effect is what allows them to travel, but if you are traveling from point A to point B across a vast distance almost instantaneously, you have to account for whatever debris might be in the way.
Okay.
Whether that's another planet, an asteroid, just whatever interstellar debris is there. In the past, you were able to use the thinking machines or AI to figure out that path.
Sure.
Since the Butlerian Jihad and AI was basically banned throughout the universe, the Spacing Guild kind of took up the mantle, and what spice allowed them to do, it's not just a drug, but it kind of almost gives you a little bit of prescience, and lets you see a little bit further into the future, so to speak, or farther ahead of you. And the Spacing Guild, they're almost biologically, over time, they've got to attune themselves to be able to do this using the spice.
Okay, but
so that's why they need the spice. They need the spice to do it. They cannot do it without spice.
Okay, but if that is the case, then our original decision not to address the Dune movies on the basis of what we thought spice was is maybe not a great decision. Because you just used the word biological.
I did, yeah. And then there was a lot, I think, when we were talking about it at first that I didn't know about the biological components that I do now just from doing the extra research. But like another example is the reason, and I'm blanking on her name. There was one of the sisters got infected and was able to kind of start trying to analyze it within her own body.
Right.
Because the Bene Gesserit do have the capability on a biological and cellular level to change what's happening.
Okay.
They have that level of mental power over their body. That's why they're able to choose the sex of their child before birth.
So are you talking about Valya?
I think it was either Valya or another sister I think it was one of the doctors that volunteered.
Right. So she was attempting to transmute. I think that was the word. And she was successful for a while.
Yeah.
But then.
But she's not. There's a specific name for the doctors in Dune. I don't know if she was also a sister, or if she was just a doctor.
Oh, I thought she was.
She might.
At least the way it was presented.
But
regardless,
does
do it. But what is interesting, though, is while the doctor is trying to do this and seems to be successful at it, even that caused the virus to change. It mutated. It did something else in response, which I thought was really realistic.
Yeah.
That this is what we see. This is viruses mutate and bacteria change. Yeah.
They change.
It's just that we don't necessarily think that we have that kind of control over what's inside. But maybe we do. Maybe that's the explanation for why some people just don't get sick, even though the virus is present in their bloodstream. In their bloodstream and their bodies, and they're just asymptomatic. There might be something there. Well,
I mean, I don't like
the anti-vax people would be super excited to hear that.
They'd be super excited to hear that. You just have to train for 10,000 years as a Bene Gesserit, and then you might be able to do it.
Yeah, who knows?
So there are a lot of biological components, I think, in here, and
although let me ask you this question though about the biological components, or even just components. It did not seem to me that the virus itself had a cyber component. So how was the AI
part of it, or
controlling it?
I think AI was used to design it.
Okay.
I think that's one. I think two, the fact that they reference nanotechnology in the eye, maybe that has something to do with the delivery mechanism of the virus.
Well,
almost like a very small scale.
Yeah. During the show, they say, during the Omnius Plague, the machines created a human pathogen releasing an enzyme affecting the liver.
Mm-hmm.
But that this new virus centers in the amygdala instead of in the liver, which would explain the extreme emotional response.
The hallucinations and
that were occurring current time in the TV show, but did not occur back during the Omnius Plague.
Right.
But so what they're saying is the machines created a pathogen which released an enzyme, which is just normal. Although I don't know, do pathogens release enzymes? Do viruses release enzymes?
Just a protein, so I suppose they could, but it'd be enzymes are pretty complicated. This is also very far into the future, so it's possible.
Yeah, I guess. Well, anyway, my question is, if the way they were talking about it, it seems like the virus was completely organic. It was not composed of any cyber components.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way I interpret it as well, because I think they might have even said at some point like an RNA retrovirus.
Yes.
Which makes it sound. So
yes.
I think maybe the delivery mechanism might be the cyber part with the eye, but I don't know how. Like, I'm thinking of like a very like small version of this, like a sprayer or something, but I don't know if that would. I don't know.
Yeah.
The
I think
mode of
we're making an
transmission
assumption.
We are definitely making assumptions. The mode of transmission, I don't think, is very clear.
Although one of the ancient sisters that occupies Lila?
Violet? Oh, yeah, Raquel.
Yeah, she says the virus is connected. I think it's odd that she used that word, but connected to an airborne genetically modified RNA retrovirus.
Yes.
That just seems extremely specific and biological. I guess we just don't know how. I mean, she says it's airborne.
She does.
But how did it get introduced in the first place?
Right. Like, what is Desmond's
role in all of this?
Is there like
is it that he's carrying it, and that the cyber eye, maybe isn't serving as a trigger, or not just
maybe
as a trigger,
like a little production center.
Yeah, and it's just coming out of his eyes.
Yeah, or it gets created in the eye and then transmitted throughout the rest of the body so that he can speak and transmit it that way. But the eye obviously has to be connected to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he is able to control it. But it seems like it's hurting him.
But interesting.
Whenever he tries to do it, especially when he was doing it to Valya, because Valya was not having it. She was...
Right. But in both cases, you have an interesting role of the brain.
Yeah.
Both of them, well, he has this cyber thing stuck into his eye, and he can see out of the eye as far as we can tell.
Right.
It's retained its physiology.
Yeah.
Or at least it doesn't look different than the other eye.
Right, and his eyes are moving.
They're moving together.
Tandem. Yeah.
You know, it seems, and he's blinking both eyes at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't. But on her, or any of the sisters, right? They're trying to transmute it, but as you said, they're trying to do it by the sheer force of will.
Right. Yeah.
But still, that's the brain that's directing something, and this virus affects the brain.
Right. Indirectly affects the amygdala.
So how could he possibly be, maybe the cyber thing, through the visual cortex, is somehow exerting influence on the amygdala in Desmond?
That would make a lot of sense.
Such that it never actually, like...
It's operating on him.
Fully expresses itself. It might actually be
subtly
trying to do some stuff, because he wasn't exactly calm, cool, and collected.
No.
Right? He and increasingly throughout the episodes, he's getting more and more odd,
audacious,
and emotional.
Yeah.
He's just not screaming in fear like everybody else is.
Right.
I don't know. I just bring it up as a question for us to consider as we see the next season, whenever that happens. We need some explanations about this interface.
And then also, how did he survive being swallowed by one of the worms?
We don't know that he was swallowed by a worm. We think he was swallowed by a worm.
By his own
his own memory, his own thing. We don't know.
We don't know that. So, like, maybe... So there are some theories that he was swallowed by the worm, and that maybe he's actually a clone of his former self, because there is cloning in the Dune universe.
But then what would that have to do with the worm? Oh, you mean like he was cloned before
they got... Because all you need is a few cells, I think, to clone a person.
Well, but also... But look, if you...
like Duncan, Idaho. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, with Duncan. But if you, Duncan had to go somewhere. He went somewhere to be cloned. It wasn't like it didn't happen in or around a worm.
Some DNA. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, in the books,
mm-hmm.
the Fremen on the planet Arrakis, where the spice is. One of the things that they can do is they can ride the worms, and they can ride them all over, all over the planet. So could it be that his memory is of, and you see it in the movies, right? Of the worm coming out and the big, they're just so massive. Maybe the memory is not really that he was swallowed as much as he got that close.
Right. That he got that close to it.
Yeah.
And, I think that could be.
He freaked out.
Yeah, and he freaked out. And also, you have to look at his lineage, too. He is Atreides and Arkan. Yeah. The same as Paul. So there's a question of, is he kind of like a proto-Kwisatz Haderach, or...
I think that's implied.
Yeah.
But I don't... I guess maybe I hope that's not the case.
I hope that, because I think it'd be too obvious.
Well, it's also so... I don't know, it's so anti what we consider that type of...
character to be.
Person to be, right? Paul Atreides is basically the Jesus element, right? He's the chosen one. He's the person everybody's been waiting for. He has these abilities, scientifically explainable, but still, he has these abilities. And he makes some mistakes. We see that in the books, but he's considered to be the hero, and we root for him, and he doesn't do crazy weird stuff. Whereas Desmond is all about crazy weird stuff.
Right.
And almost being irrational.
The jihad. But
that was for a purpose.
That was going to happen anyway. I think that that's why he decided to go eventually go along with it and become the Lisan al-Gaib and lean into that. Yeah. It's because he knew it was going to happen anyway. At least if it happens, he's there.
I think he knew it was going to happen, and he was going to take advantage of it for his own, purposes, to control the planet, to be in charge of all the spice.
Right.
Because that makes him the de facto, or somebody in his lineage, emperor.
The emperor, yeah. And that leads to, spoiler alert, later on, his son.
Yes, all the stuff that happens. But with Desmond, I'll take it back. He could be going down that same path.
Of what, like Leto?
Or
Paul?
Either.
Yeah.
But he may not be able to handle it the way they could.
Well, yeah, because remember, this is 10,000 years in the past, so like the Bene Gesserit aren't as...
They're not even the Bene Gesserit yet.
They're not.
They're starting.
They're starting, yeah. The voice was just discovered.
And the technology, 10,000 years, it looks pretty advanced compared to where we are right now. But another 10,000 years from then going forward, there's a lot of development. Right now, 10,000 years later, you have a fully fledged, prolific Bene Gesserit with processes and procedures and training and all kinds of, stuff happening. You have that. You have, one can only assume, more advanced technology. Although I did say this to you when we both first saw these episodes, that I was surprised that the spaceships appear to be
almost
exactly the same. In the television show, and 10,000 later in the movie. 10,000 years later in the movie. But it's...
Some people have tried to explain that as the lack of thinking machines caused stagnation, but I don't buy that, because look at how humanity has advanced without AI in just, 300 years?
Yeah.
Without AI, there's no way that there weren't innovations without AI.
In fairness, we don't get to see inside the spaceship, so we don't know.
Yeah, so maybe there's some new...
what the differences between the two. And maybe this is somehow the ideal shape, and there's no improving upon it.
Right.
In terms of the shape of it from the outside.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, there are certain technologies that we have that start, once they start getting so advanced, they start to plateau. I think cell phones are a good example. When was the last time you saw a phone that really looked very different from something that you saw from the very first iPhone that was released?
Well, there was the one that came out...
There are the folding ones.
The ones that unfold. But they still just unfold to do exactly what you see. And also it's easy for it to, fold enough to just stand. Yeah.
But they really don't look that.
No, otherwise we're just changing size.
It's a rectangle with a screen at the end of the day. So but we know internally there are a lot of advances and changes that have happened.
Yeah.
But from what we can see on the surface, it looks almost identical.
Right, and what we're waiting for, and what's coming closer, is the evolutionary jump.
Right.
Right. And they keep trying with the glasses and the whole AI environment, but so I think that, just getting back to the episodes here, I think that we don't have enough information on the virus. We don't have enough information on the cyber component. People are beginning to put some things together, but this is where we're at in terms of our investigation, our disease detectives investigation. We just don't know what's happening, but we're beginning to see some evidence of data, right? So we see that Valya is able to transmute the virus and get over it somehow. So so we have person one that has been able to do it.
Right.
We have Desmond. If they can just get a hold of him, they're going to be able to figure out what the deal is, right?
Be able to get him. And it's not like he has... Well, the voice doesn't work on him. He doesn't have the voice, so it's not like he could really get out of captivity as easily as Valya was able to.
Right.
Which I thought was very funny, that they thought they could put her in captivity.
Well...
And the voice wasn't really known, but...
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think going back a little bit to the Omnius plague that was created by the thinking machines, there was also this society of advanced bioengineers. They were human, but they were called the Tulaxa.
Okay.
And they're the ones that do all the cloning.
Okay.
They're the ones that made all the Duncan Idahos. And
are they human?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's assumed that they played a part in developing the Omnius plague and potentially this virus as well.
Okay. Is there an implication that perhaps this was a lab leak?
It's very possible, I think. I think it's very possible that it could have been a lab leak. Either a lab leak or it's intentional biowarfare. It's not. We know it's not natural.
Natural.
We know that.
Right. Okay.
You don't often get that in the real world, but we can eliminate natural completely from the equation here.
Yeah. Okay.
I also think it's interesting that the virus affects the amygdala and causes you to have these, hallucinations of your worst fears. because in the Dune universe, and I think even beyond that, and there's this phrase called that goes, fear is the mind killer. Like, fear is what will basically hold you back from doing things, or from living your life, or from learning new things. So I think it's an interesting...
Well, at the most basic level, yeah.
Yeah.
But it also allows you to overcome various things. We see that in the movies.
Right.
When Paul is put to the test by the Mother Superior,
Mm-hmm.
his mother is standing outside, a member of the Bene Gesserit is standing outside, and she's praying this fear is the mind killer prayer.
Right.
And he's thinking about it too himself.
Right.
And that's how him controlling that fear is what allows him to pass the test. Right. So it is interesting that maybe this all goes back, and maybe what's in the box is the virus.
Oh.
We don't know.
Because he was hallucinating when his hand was in the box, right?
I don't think so.
Or was he?
I don't think he was hallucinating.
There was a burning sensation.
Right, he was it felt like he was burning.
Yeah.
I think he says that, it burns.
Yeah, it burns. I think you might be right. I think we might have just figured it out.
It's a possibility. It's a possibility. But I think, too, there's one thing I do want to say. When we talk about biological warfare and bioterrorism, these days, everybody almost always thinks about the anthrax letters or things loaded into missiles, the idea of spreading a disease that would kill everybody, kill your enemy, and then you just get to, if you have immunity, you just get to take over, right, in theory. Now, it never worked that way when people were experimenting with this stuff back in the day. It's one of the reasons that the U.S. shut down its offensive biological weapons program, because they felt that using it could not be controlled enough. You couldn't control where it was going. You couldn't, right. And while you might be able to save critical infrastructure, it wouldn't be affected by the virus. You were never sure if you could really send people, your own people, into that same area, right? Because you just weren't sure, what was happening. And we're talking about viruses and bacteria, but if we just focus on the viruses, once you let it go, it's not like it's just going to stay that way forever. Right. You have to expect that it's going to mutate.
Right.
Especially if it kills all the hosts.
Right.
Right? That's one of the things that pushes back on a virus and causes it to change.
Yeah.
So, but those are not the only biological agents out there in the world. We think of it that way because they're the most horrifying.
Right.
But there are other biological agents that have been developed for the purpose of, we believe, for the purpose of managing an existing population. So you don't have to kill everybody. I think we've talked about it in other podcasts, but we've certainly talked about it here at the Commission. The theories about aflatoxin, right, and what it would do, and there are other biological agents that would just reduce your immunity or make you extremely tired.
Right.
Imagine if you could weaponize something that presented like COVID, but just the part where you got really, 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 really tired, right, and you stayed tired, and then you had long COVID afterwards, but it was even worse than what it usually presents at. And then those people who are so affected by it, then they're going to be, how are they going to fight against people who are have no issue with this whatsoever? I just think it's interesting when you think about that stuff, and then you think about the virus we see in Dune prophecy. Yeah. If you could create an emotional response, which is like subtract the fire burning the person,
fire burning stuff.
If you could modify that, take that out, and all you were doing was affecting the amygdala, that is interesting. Yeah. We know that it can be done with
other viruses, bacteria.
Well, I was going to say with drugs.
Oh yeah, well,
right.
Drugs,
and with chemical agents. Yeah. It can be done. again, very hard to control, but you could do it.
Right. And in the show, they have control.
But they have control.
Control.
Not only are they using a virus that we would not usually consider to be a controllable thing,
right,
in any way, other than antivirals or your immune system finally fighting it off, shutting it down. But also, you see that it's affecting something in such a way that you're dealing with two things at once.
Right.
The actual illness or whatever, and the fear.
Right.
I just think it's an interesting thing that it's not so far beyond what an offensive biological weapons program might be trying to accomplish.
Right, exactly.
It could be an early thing.
Yeah.
Right? You know, if you could just subtract the burning up of the host.
Yeah, from the inside out. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, just having that fear response, I think, is more than effective enough
to deal with the population.
To deal with them.
Now, I will say, though, it is kind of extreme. You don't want everybody running around mad. That's
right.
Not control.
Right. So you probably want to tamp it down a bit.
Yeah.
But I also think it is interesting. You know, you mentioned one of the reasons people haven't used biological weapons throughout history is because they're worried about blowback. The machines don't have to worry about that.
Right.
So they can make whatever they wanted.
Whatever they wanted. Yeah, and it certainly wasn't going to hurt them. You're exactly right. That's true.
Yeah.
That might be another reason that this was invented.
Yeah.
By why they invented it, why they went down the path of biological.
Because conventional explosives and chemicals would hurt the machines.
Sure.
But bio probably wouldn't.
Sure. Interesting. Okay. Fascinating.
All right. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about before we get to the ratings?
Well, I do think that we've spent a lot of time sort of theorizing. I think it's worth just sort of mentioning that we have a huge challenge when it comes to attribution.
Yeah.
And I think this show does a great job of showing, in a very fictional sense, what are all the possibilities here? You have little bits and pieces of information. You have a person who has something, and but how convenient, they burn up from the inside out. So there's what evidence is going to be sitting there, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to find the virus anymore.
Right.
So, but bits and pieces. That is where we are right now too, in terms of biological attribution.
Yeah.
So how interesting that however many years from now into the future, tens of thousands of years, we're still having difficulty with attribution.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. We do talk about this in recommendation 6 of our blueprint for biodefense, our more recent version. But it's just such a difficult challenge. I think there are expectations that people have that we can just sort of, hey, let's just figure it out. But I think that this shows that it's just not that easy.
Right.
It just isn't going to be that easy, especially if you're talking about advanced biological weapons or advanced science or advanced use of some science to do something else. And the other thing, too, is we have talked about convergence, cyber bioconvergence.
Yeah.
We had a meeting about that in 2019, so September 2019, so five and something years ago. Somebody says in the show that Desmond, his eye is the virus, is the quote. Inserted by a thinking machine. It is just interesting, I think, just to think about that convergence.
Yeah.
And at what point there is no difference.
Right, because it's AI, cyber, bio, and then also Asha, biodefense as well. Because there was an attack that took place across 2 planets simultaneously.
Yeah.
on 2 different people.
Yeah, and was that the result of...
Yeah.
I mean, was that intentional? Did we have some contamination, backwards or forwards contamination?
Yeah. Right.
We don't know. And how did it move? We were talking about triggering, but how did the virus itself move?
Right.
It is interesting. And you are doing some research on the possibility of viruses existing in space.
Yeah. Yep. I am.
So it's possible.
It's possible. Yeah, there are viruses
in this world that the virus, without a carrier, without a spaceship, or without anything, moved itself from one planet to another planet and survived it.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. And yeah.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to bring up is somebody in the show, I think it's Valya, when she's, well, obviously she's young. She says, in responsible hands, any tool can be used for the betterment of humanity. And when I heard that, I thought, this is kind of the argument for doing the risky research. Dual-use research of concern.
Yeah.
And the other things in that sort of general category. People don't want to let it go because of the potential for bettering humanity, or maybe not bettering humanity, but making things better, solving things, helping people. We don't want to get rid of some of this stuff.
No.
And and to be honest, I think too, we're way beyond getting rid of some of these activities. Nobody's shutting down CRISPR all throughout, the planet. It's not going to happen now. Nobody's going to do that. So I just thought that was a really interesting philosophy, because when I heard that, I thought she's right, but at the same time, it's her.
Yeah.
She's not really that much about bettering humanity, but she kind of is. She is and she's not.
She is. Like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think she has good intentions, but she is not executing them in a just or fair or good way. She's basically taking lead of the seconds approach of, I'm going to do what I want to make humanity better, and you're going to deal with it.
Right. This is the way it is.
It's just the way it is. Yeah.
But let us just say, right now, there are people who are behaving exactly the same way and are saying this is the way it is. Right.
And they could be wrong.
They could be wrong, or they could be right, but it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Valya in this show, in one way she is doing a lot of political and governmental and genetic manipulation to get certain people in positions. But it's not just for the sole purpose of her controlling them. It is to do other things. But at the same time, the other side of it is she's all flipped out and seeking retribution for the murder of her brother by an Atreides. That's just not acceptable, but I do think that is realistic.
Well, yeah, because you're going to have those people, and they're going to have emotions, and they're going to direct that energy with those emotions. Direct that energy toward making the world a better place or not. They're still going to have those outbursts out.
And what's the difference in your mind? She thinks it is a perfectly okay thing to seek that retribution.
Yeah. And I think she thinks what she did to all of the sisters of Mother Dorothea was the right thing to do.
The right thing to do. Yeah. Okay. Well, now let's get to rating.
All right. Let's get to the ratings.
Okay.
So our first category is relevance to commission recommendations. I was thinking around 3.5. I think they addressed Asha Biodefense, Asha attribution, like you said, AI bio, or cyber bio, whichever way you want to look at it. Were there any others?
Well, I would say that it's a nightmare scenario if 10,000 years from now we still don't have any diagnostic tests.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You shouldn't have to depend on a person being possessed by somebody in her line, her family line, that happened to be a doctor, that happened to see a plague. That is, I mean, that'll be horrible if that's the case. So we do have recommendations. I think it shows why we need diagnostics for sure. We have a whole report about diagnostic tests. I don't know. I gave it a 4.
A 4? We can go with a 4. I think it touched on a lot.
It certainly provoked a lot of thought.
Yeah.
About some of our recommendations.
Yeah.
So okay, let's say 4. Let's say 4.
Scientific accuracy. I think this one's a little difficult because, well, yes, they do claim that everything is scientifically explainable. It isn't always with
current science.
So there is a little bit of hand-waviness there. The burning, in particular, I thought was not necessary. I guess they needed a visual way to show the viewer this is happening, but it didn't feel very... I don't know why something operating on the amygdala would cause you to burn from the inside out.
I don't know how anything would... Well, except for those people who spontaneously combust somehow.
Do they?
I think that's a real thing.
It's a real thing?
Yeah, that we haven't really explained. But I thought...
Well, maybe then.
I personally gave it a 3.
Yeah.
But, it's a difficult thing to assess. Because you're also talking about science in the future.
Right.
So maybe if you look at that construct, it's perfectly accurate if you accepted it as real in the first place.
Yeah, if there was a suspension of disbelief. I think it makes some sense.
So you could say, I would say, so then, okay, you give it a 5 for that, let's imagine.
Yeah.
Right? But then you have to give it a 1 because right now, none of that is accurate. And nobody's, using their mind, able to transmute a virus. And the way they were diagnosing. And by the way, what was in those tanks? The 4 tanks that Tula winds up looking at while the doctor is trying to transmute the virus inside of her. What were those?
I don't know.
Was it some kind of...
They might have been cloning tanks or...
Well, I thought they were tanks
organ
too.
Replacement? I don't know.
I thought maybe they were... Well, but they were showing the virus and how it was behaving. So I thought maybe it was kind of like a very, 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 very advanced microscope somehow.
Yeah,
or real-time MRI. Except, on such a level that you can see the viruses. But anyway, so I think, you take your 5, you take your 1, and in the middle is a 3. So let's call it a 3.
I agree. All right.
Okay.
Okay, scenario development. I gave it a 4. I think it was very creative, and while we didn't get all the answers that we might have wanted, the fact that it was making us think and making us want more information, I think was a good sign.
I gave it a 5.
Okay.
And the reason I gave it a 5 was I think they did a very good job of coming up with a scenario, but also I think it did an excellent job of leading you towards expanding the scenario. We're already talking about what's going to happen in season 2. You can see they're going to add more to the scenario. We're going to get more information. That's going to not change the scenario, but it's going to change our understanding of the scenario.
Right.
I think in too many cases with movies and with real world training exercises and things, those scenarios don't go anywhere. They don't do anything. They serve more as a starting point.
Right.
Here's your scenario, and then, okay, now everybody forget about the scenario and act however you would act. In this case, I don't think that's the case. I think so. That's why I thought it's a superior development of scenario.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Let's give it a 5.
Okay.
All right. Entertainment value, I gave it a 5. I was especially mostly entertained toward the end.
Uh-huh.
I think the last 3 episodes, I would say, more so than the first 3, but I think it definitely had a strong finish.
I would give it a 5 too. I could not help but think about all of the books that Herbert wrote. Never mind his son for a second. There are like 16 of these things. I read every single one of them, and there's just more and more and more and more and more and more and more about the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah.
And it just gets to be so much. It's so heavy. So in other words, by the time you get to that point, well, you get a lot of information.
Yeah.
And it's creative. It's not very entertaining.
You're tired.
You're dying.
About the Bene Gesserit.
By the end of that series. But here, I think,
seeing
it's
the
just
origins
starting.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a 5.
Okay.
I'm good with a 5.
Let's give it a 5. So the next category is success of the imagination or creativity. I think it is very creative what they've done. So I would probably hover around 4 or 5. I think the creativity of using AI and bio, just the nature of the virus, I think is very interesting.
Yeah.
Even though it's not wholly believable that a virus could cause you to burn up from the inside out.
Did the books that the son wrote, did they address this
the
time
plague?
before? Well, not so much, not necessarily the Omnius Plague, but the time before Herbert's first book, Dune.
Yes.
Is this TV show's stuff addressed?
Some of it is drawn from that.
Okay.
From those books.
So maybe not so imaginative, is what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying.
Just because we have never seen it.
Yeah.
Just because it's new to us.
I haven't read Brian Herbert's prequel that this is supposedly based on. But I have heard from people that they prefer the show to his.
Okay. Let's give it a 4.5.
Yeah, 4.5. Okay, shock or surprise value is the next category. I was definitely shocked or surprised by the fact that this was a virus. Because I was constantly trying to figure out what is going on, and then you finally get that answer in episode 5, and you're like, wow, that's not what I expected. And then you also get the surprise that Desmond is the son of Tula. And Kieran Atreides, which I didn't think was that shocking or surprising. I think I'd guessed that earlier on. That he was. There's some significance.
Yeah.
But overall, I think there was definitely some good surprise moments in there.
Well, I was surprised to see the Harkonnens and the Atreides on the same planet. That surprised me.
That was pretty cool.
I was surprised at how the Bene Gesserit started, if it started this way. I always thought of the Bene Gesserit as more of a religion and less of whatever this is.
Yeah.
So just, surprising. I don't know that anything happened that was so shocking to me. Of course, I wasn't shocked by the virus because you told me, hey, there's a virus, because you wanted me to watch it. But yeah, I give it high points for surprise. So what did you think it was?
I think I gave it a 4.
Yeah, I gave it a 4 too.
Okay, we'll give it a 4. And the next category is government policy. The government really doesn't do a whole lot.
I gave it a 2.
Yeah.
I thought Carino it wasn't on top of things.
Yeah.
I think even without the manipulation of the Bene Gesserit,
he was still not.
He was still. He even when he found out about things, he just wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. He was too easily swayed. Anyway.
Right. Yeah. Like Desmond shows up and he's like, "Oh yeah, you can be my."
Yeah, and how he was treating his wife, who was clearly an incredibly squared away person, even if there wasn't going to be some kind of romantic connection between the two of them, he was being unnecessarily dismissive of her.
Right.
But she knew what she was doing.
Yeah,
that's just terrible policy.
Yeah.
I just thought when you hear about what the government is doing, it's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. So yeah, I would agree with the 2.
Okay.
All right.
Let's do it 2.
Portrayal by the actors, I gave it a 4. I think some were stronger than others, and I don't want to name names.
I gave it a 3, but that's not to say it's bad.
No, yeah, I don't think anybody
right?
was atrocious.
You don't look at anybody and think, oh, they're so terrible.
Yeah.
But I would not say that it was like a spectacular ensemble cast where every single person was just super strong. And it's difficult with this kind of cast, right? The little kid.
Right.
He's a little kid.
Yeah, it's hard
to difficult.
Judge a child actor. I mean, unless they're really good, that's really
But even then, for what he had to do, how much, could he explore, that. I thought there was just a lot of screaming and yelling, for all different kind of reasons, and that's not necessarily great in terms of acting. I think, though, the reason I gave it a 3 is when I think of portrayal by actors, I'm not really talking about acting. I'm usually talking about the actual scientist or somebody taking on a particular role. In this case, we have Lila, who's being occupied by ancestors, and the way she and others talked about the medicine, talked about the science, it was not natural.
I agree.
And we have talked about this before with other podcasts.
Right, where it sound like we're the
Well,
actors.
when we talked about Hail Mary, one of the things we say in our social media, as well as I think on the podcast, is whoever winds up playing Ryland Grace, and it's going to be the guy who played Ken.
Ryan Gosling.
Ryan Gosling, yes. Sorry about that, Ryan. Is going to have to do a really good job because that whole thing is about science.
Right.
And you can't just have some random person in there who can't deliver those lines properly.
Right.
I think we had a lot of people in this show who were good actors, but were asked to spit out mouthfuls.
Yeah.
And that whole thing I read about the airborne mRNA retrovirus.
Yeah.
That actress, the way she delivers that line, it's like one word at a time.
Right.
She wanted to get it right, and that's okay, but I would not say that's a wonderful portrayal when she was supposed to be occupied by a scientist.
Right, exactly.
Right? But she did better with some of the other stuff. So I gave it a 3. I thought that kind of thing happened quite a bit.
All right, let's go with a 3 and give Metal up, because I agree. I think that did happen, and there were some cases. I think especially with Lila being overtaken by Raquel and Dorothea, I don't feel like she got good direction.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our next category.
Okay.
Which is direction.
Yep.
I gave it a 3.
I think it should get a 4, and I'll tell you why. It's because it's not just direction of the actors.
Yes,
the director has a say in the flow, and I think it flowed really well. Which gets us back to entertainment value, right?
Yeah.
Number 1. Number 2, part of this universe, in terms of the movies and the TV show, is showing the expanse, the spectacular expanse of the universe, and these various planets. And the use of CGI and the costumes and all that. I think, I know we're overlapping a bit with production too, but the director had a lot to say about
production.
This is how you're going to do this. This is how this is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to behave. So I gave it a 3, but I'm thinking to upgrade to
a 4.
A 4.
Okay. I think I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
I think so the next category is production.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for a lot of the same reasons you just outlined, and because everything just looked so amazing, I'd give that a 4 as
I-
well, if not 5.
I give it a 4, and the reason I
Yeah.
give it a 4, I'm taking off a point because I feel like they got permission from whoever did the movies to
Reuse assets.
possibly reuse
Yeah.
film, or how they showed the spaceships and stuff, and it just was like it wasn't different enough to me.
Yeah.
So I think somebody cheated a little
Yeah,
bit there.
just a little bit.
So I say a 4.
Okay, we'll go with a 4. And then writing, I gave it a 4 as well.
Okay.
I think the writing, following the direction of the production was good, was entertaining, and really
What do you think could have been improved about the writing?
the pacing.
But isn't pacing and direction?
It can be in direction or writing, I guess. I felt that it picked up quite a bit in the last 3 episodes, but the first 3 I didn't feel like matched
Hmm.
the pacing. But again, like, I don't know if that's a writing. Overall, I think I gave the writing a 4.
Uh-huh.
I don't think I just took off a point.
Okay, let's go with a 4.
Okay.
Okay. So
pretty
what's
highly
the
rated.
average?
The average is 3.86.
Okay.
So that's a really high mark for
Yeah.
Dune Prophecy.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
all right. Well, thank you all for joining us. And remember that fear is the mind killer. All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Okay. See ya.